last video about trying to skip Hegel, really, trying to make it clear that there are things in Hegel that are good, but not get sucked into the vortex that is Hegel. I know a certain amount. I'm sort of trying to get the right balance between not becoming a Hegel expert, because Hegel experts need 7 lifetimes, and inevitably I would suggest there's something else going on, like that they are in fact a fan of Hegel, and that they think that Hegel is the solution to certain conditions of the current politics, which I would say the solution is in fact to go into a more complex scenario around understanding the nature of left and right wing politics. But yes, I imagined somebody responding to my video in terms of my previous video, in terms of its talking about my obsession with the science hegemony, as in terms of that they would respond to it in the sense that they would fail to see the things in philosophy. I guess I'm talking about how my position or accusation is that the current philosophy is rejecting basically the whole of philosophy, that they haven't really engaged with philosophy at all. That they would go back and sort of say, well, I don't find any proof for God in this and that, blah, blah, blah. Even without going back to before Plato, I'm sort of thinking of going through some of the things that were significant. So my sense is, I want to say that Kant, little as I understand how he managed to prove, or even whether he really did manage to prove, some sense in which there is a priori or prior thought prior to experience of the senses. What the outcome of that is a synthesis of the quite sort of mathematical, rational, supposedly rational philosophies of a guy called Descartes, who was thinking stuff. He is thinking stuff through in his head. He was working it through in his head rationally, so called. And on the other side of that is the empiricists. They said, no, we don't just believe in what I can know in my rational mind. I prefer to say I only really trust things that I sense. My senses, I make observations like a scientist. And Kant is kind of supposedly the later idea of the dialectic. He is the synthesis. So the dialectic is the thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. And yes, so what I was saying was that the outcome of Kant is a kind of synthesis of these two sides, and what that produces is a swathe of rebellion against the materialist aspects of what's called the Enlightenment. Now, Descartes was really the big early figure in the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment comes out of the Renaissance and the beginnings of some kind of examination of the physical world. We're thinking Da Vinci and also Francis Bacon. But actually, Descartes was already, although it's said that the Enlightenment era really started 30 years, only literally about 30 years before Descartes, he's already responding to people who are very much materialists, and he's saying that he's not just believing in what he can prove exists in a kind of outside world, non-mental world, physical world. He, in fact, is saying trying to build a philosophical rock to stand on. I think, therefore, I am doesn't question that I am. It's not ontologically based sense of I. No, it is. Sorry, it isn't. There are anti-ontologically based philosophies that question how can you even show that I exist. Ontology, in a sense, says this. It has to do with being. That's what the word relates to the word being. And there is some sense in which ontology is looking at what exists rather than questioning the proof that it exists. That doesn't quite make sense. Anyway, Google definition of the word ontology, and that's what you'll come up with. And if you put an AI search into does ontology tend to move away from the kind of questioning that I exist that we find in Berkeley, for instance, AI will go deep into some very heavy philosophers and pull out that yes, in fact, we can get a clear answer that that is the case. So that's what I'm talking about. So Descartes is not necessarily anti-ontological, anti-observing a question of being, of what exists. He is actually much more saying, well, actually, I can say I exist because I think this is what I know about the fact that I exist. It is that I think. Hume and Locke are on the other side. They would say, all I can trust is what I sense, whereas Descartes says, all I can trust is the fact that I know I exist because I think. It's in the mind, it's rational. It's rational in the sense that it's in the mind, it's working it out in the mind. So Descartes was, as I say, working out these rocks on which to stand. In refutation of a kind of questioning everything. I won't listen to you until you've proven what you're saying is true. That that everything is kind of shaky and unprovable and questionable. He's finding rocks on which philosophy can stand. So that the Enlightenment era is very much on that kind of rejection of religion, kind of gradual rejection of religion path. And therefore there is a tendency within that to be quite materialist and to be very much questioning any kind of idea of social organization based around such ideas as God. Now, in response to Kant, what you get is a great swathe of kicking back against this materialism of the Enlightenment, and we get philosophically we get a thing called German idealism. People like Schelling and two brothers called Schlegel and Fichte, and of course Hegel. So the product of Kant is this rebellion against the materialist and the anti-idealist, the anti-Platonic. So yes, you get this wave of idealist philosophers, and yeah, in my catalogue of ways in which philosophy has not been simply this confirmation of the modern, the modernity obsessed and anti-continental and English speaking Anglophile group that currently dominates. And one can pretend to just completely ignore that there was a thing called the German idealists, and that there was this rebellion against this Enlightenment era. I won't touch on how Descartes thought there was a God, because it's not a very well argued position, and similarly also Thomas Aquinas basing his ideas on Aristotle is not a very well argued position. This idea of a first cause takes you only to this idea of a creator God, and the creator God is a concept of an ancient idea of needing to know where we come from. It's also a cultural phenomenon. It's not something that helps us in any way in terms of what are, in the modern sense, called archetypes. Now, in philosophy, the history of philosophy, other times in which there are elements that can't be ignored, that don't fit with this rewriting of philosophy as all being now somehow science-based. The proposal of someone called Marianne Talbot at Oxford University Continuing Education Department is that the theories of Plato are very, very strong, and that this what I'm going to call Anglophile or non-continental, anti-continental philosophical coup, she called it simply reductivism, to say that at the very least Plato's theory of ideal forms doesn't give us some kind of understanding of language, and she said that this Anglophile philosophical stance simply rejects the side of our existence that is internal, that is the mind, and that is cultural and social. One has to always add that this going into the cultural, going into the mental rather than the physical, always involves something to do with the social and the cultural, because you can't really separate the individual from the society, and much in philosophy supports this, or is on the side of this idea that individualism is really quite a flawed concept. So Marianne Talbot proposes that even if you don't like his concept of goodness and say, well, there's no basis for this, it would be reductive to say that that there is no good theory in terms of the nature of mind and of language in terms of his ideal forms, and that it would be simply, and that she says that modernity obsessed pro-science Anglophile philosophy is merely approaching this aspect of mind and saying, well, there's nothing we can say about that, and so, hey, let's move on. But she is saying that you can't just say, I base philosophy on proof, and there's nothing we can say about mind, so move on. You have to be able to engage beyond your reductive position. So, yeah, there's a sense of a very current, powerful theory being put forward by Marianne Talbot in terms of Plato's theory of forms. And again, so I'm saying that can't be ignored and made into how everything is now non-Platonic, Aristotelian, Anglophile type philosophy. I was also going to say in relation to that Descartes famously declared that the mind and the body are two aspects of our existence. In other words, that the mind, it's a difficult thing to make any statements about, but what we can say is that we have positions in the mind, and those minds interact with the outside physical world. So there's a sense of that the person moving through the physical world. There's the mind inside the mental inside world, and the interaction with the outside physical world, and understanding that there are two aspects to what we must consider in terms of philosophy. So again, I would say that if you simply say, oh, I can't say anything about the mind because I'm using a proof method, and therefore I'm just walking away, and yeah, let's not worry about that. That this is not good philosophy, and that it's ridiculous to insist on proof in the face of a complete inability to engage with the mind. And in fact, philosophy as a subject does engage with the mind, and there's plenty that we can say, and that this idea of trying to build rocks on which to stand is very much part of philosophy, is really, really important and fascinating, I think, area that much can be explored within, this sense of what are the rocks that we can stand on. Can we say that there is a need for goodness in humanity, or else chaos takes over? This is the basis of Greek mythology, is that if we just are bad or ignore others and don't get involved, don't be positive social beings, then this sense of chaos takes over. Things fall apart if we don't look after them. Voltaire said, "Tend your garden," at the end of Candide, a great book, and it's often not known that this was his great conclusion, to tend your garden. It's a lovely idea. So I won't go further back than Plato, and we'll leave it at that, although really the strongest sense of this monism, as it's going to be called, is in the sources out of which Plato and Socrates come. And this is a very deep philosophical, fascinating debate between the students of Heraclitus, who said you can't stand in the same river twice, and the students of Parmenides and also of Pythagoras, who said that there is a monism. But apparently we ignore all that because it's just old people long ago and we don't listen to them. You can just cross that off and say philosophy starts with Aristotle, and we don't actually even acknowledge Plato. Let's not acknowledge Plato. Let's say, oh, we're Aristotelians now and Plato's all rubbish. Yeah, that's like ignoring the whole of philosophy. So odd, very odd behavior. Okay.